Israel and Hamas reached a ceasefire deal yesterday. So what are the details of the agreement? This is Global of 254, your hub for top news from Africa and beyond. Welcome. So after a war that saw at least 46,000 Palestinians and around 1,300 Israelis lose their lives, Israel and Hamas have agreed to a ceasefire deal. The deal will see a pause to an incredibly devastating 15-month war in Gaza Strip, raising the hope of an end to the deadliest and most destructive fighting between the bitter rivals. The deal, which comes after weeks of meticulous negotiations in Qatari capital, promises the release of dozens of hostages held by Hamas in phases, the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners in Israel, and will allow hundreds of thousands of people displaced in Gaza to return to what remains of their homes. It will also allow the inflow of critically needed humanitarian aid into Gaza. 3 officials from the US and 1 from Hamas confirmed that a deal had been reached, and 1 senior Israeli official said details are still being ironed out. The agreement still needs to be approved by Israel's cabinet and is expected to go into effect in the days ahead. Over 6 weeks, 33 of the nearly 100 hostages are expected to be reunited with their families after months into captivity. It remains unclear how and when many displaced Palestinians will return to what remains of their homes, and whether the agreement will lead to a total end of the war and full withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza, a key demand for Hamas for releasing the remaining hostages. Palestinians now face the taxing task of rebuilding and governing post-war Gaza. All in all, the deal offers the refreshing sign that Israel and Hamas are drawing to a close to a war that has destabilized the Middle East and attracted criticism across the world. An estimated 90% of Gaza population has been displaced and created one of the world's worst humanitarian crises in modern history. More than 100 captives were released from Gaza in a week-long truce in November 2023. The latest deal was brokered by the US alongside Egypt and Qatar. This comes after Israel and Lebanon's Hezbollah reached a ceasefire in November after a year-long conflict linked to the war in Gaza. Health officials in Palestine say that over half of the 46,000 Palestinians killed in the war are women and children. Thousands of homes have been destroyed, with hospitals barely functioning, as experts warn that northern Gaza faces famine. Joe Biden, who heavily supported the Israel army but expressed annoyance with civilian deaths, announced the layout of the 3-phase ceasefire agreement. He said the first phase would last for 6 weeks and include a full and complete ceasefire, a withdrawal of Israeli troops from densely populated areas of Gaza, and a release of a number of hostages, including women, older people, and the wounded, in exchange for the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners detained in Israel. Humanitarian aid would also start pouring into Gaza. The second and most difficult phase would include the release of all remaining living hostages, including male soldiers, and Israeli soldiers would withdraw from Gaza. The third phase calls for the start of a major reconstruction of Gaza, which faces decades of rebuilding after the devastation caused by the war. Hamas had been demanding assurances for a permanent end to the war and a complete withdrawal of all Israeli forces from Gaza. Israel, meanwhile, has repeatedly said it would not halt the war until it destroys Hamas' military and governing capabilities. Trump celebrated the soon-to-be-announced agreement in a post on his Truth social media platform. Hezbollah's acceptance of a ceasefire in Lebanon after it had suffered heavy blows, and the overthrow of President Bashar Assad in Syria were both major setbacks for Iran and its allies across the region, including Hamas, which was left increasingly isolated. Israel was heavily criticized by the international community, including its closest ally, the US, for civilian deaths. Israel says it killed about 17,000 Hamas militants, though no evidence has been tabled as a proof. It blamed Hamas for the civilian toll, accusing the group of using schools, hospitals, and residential areas for military activity. Y'all know that South Africa indicted Israel in the ICJ for committing genocide in Gaza, and investigations are still going on. Also, you remember last year, the ICC, a separate body but also based in The Hague, issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu, his defense minister, and Hamas military chiefs for war crimes and crimes against humanity linked to the war. Netanyahu was under intense pressure to bring home the hostages whose plight has agonized the nation. Their families have been a powerful lobbying group with immense public support backed by months of mass protests urging the government to reach a deal with Hamas. Israeli authorities have already concluded that more than a third of the roughly 100 remaining captives are dead, and there are fears that others are no longer alive. A series of videos released by Hamas showing surviving hostages in great distress, combined with news that a growing number of abducted Israelis are dead, put added pressure on the Israeli leader. Hamas, a military group that doesn't accept Israel's existence, has come under immense pressure from Israeli military operations, including the invasion of Gaza's largest cities and towns and the takeover of the border between Gaza and Egypt. Its top leaders, including Yahya Sinwar, who believed to have masterminded the October 7, 2023 attack, have been unalived. Netanyahu has vowed to continue the war until Hamas military and governing capabilities are destroyed. However, it's never been clear what or if that's even possible, considering the group's deep roots in the Palestinian society, its presence in Lebanon and the occupied West Bank, and its exiled leadership. If the ceasefire takes hold, both sides face many difficult and unanswered questions. As the war dies down, Netanyahu faces growing calls for post-war investigations into the October 7 security failures that could convict him partially, the worst in Israel's history. His far-right governing partners that were opposed to the ceasefire deal could also bring down the coalition and call for early elections. The U.S. has tried to advance sweeping post-war plans for a reformed Palestinian Authority to govern Gaza with Arab and international assistance. As part of the plans, the U.S. hopes that Saudi Arabia irons out its relations with Israel in return for U.S. security guarantees and aid in setting up a civilian nuclear program. Those plans, however, rely on incredible progress towards the creation of a Palestinian state, something Netanyahu and much of Israel's political class oppose. Netanyahu has held that Israel will maintain open-ended security control over Gaza as well as occupied West Bank, territories captured by Israel in the 1967 war that Palestinians want for their future state. In the absence of a post-war arrangement with Palestinian support, Hamas is likely to remain a significant force in Gaza and could reconstitute its military capabilities in Israel if Israel forces fully withdraw. With that, we wish Gaza a quick recovery and a peaceful, prosperous future. Thanks for watching.